Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced at North Idaho College on the shores of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guest.
On today's program, we're pleased to kick off a two-week series in a very special celebration at North Idaho College, and we're going to be kicking that off, as I said, with the Jubilee celebration of the 75th year of North Idaho College. And there will be all kinds of activities from now through next May, and we are going to certainly be inviting the public to many, many special events. But on today's program, and again next week, we have two very special guests that have the most to do with what's going to happen. First of all, I welcome to the program Sheila Wood, who is a retired English faculty member at North Idaho College and was on the Board of Trustees. And while on that board, she came up with this wonderful idea that we need to recognize this remarkable 75-year, I would say, journey through memory lane. Sheila, welcome to the program and congratulations on this accomplishment.
Thank you, Tony. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I'm equally pleased to welcome to the program one of my colleagues, one of my great friends, Fran Barr. She is a member of the English department, and she is truly the author of this book, and it is now available, and we'll talk about it later on the program, but here's what it looks like. And it was a very, very special project that took many, many months and years, and this is called The Gathering Place, A History of North Idaho College. Fran, also welcome to the program.
Thanks, Tony.
And I'm pleased to have our two regular panelists here to help celebrate this kickoff. First of all is Janelle Burke, who is an attorney in the state of Idaho, and next to her is Erna Reinhardt, who is Director of Public Relations at North Idaho College and is having a lot to do with this celebration. With that, Janelle will ask the first question.
Well, it's wonderful to have a celebration, and what a happy celebration this is going to be. 75 years, that's a real accomplishment. But tell us a little bit about how the book got started. And should be very short, because I know we want to get right into what is in the book, but can you tell us a little bit about why the book?
When I was a trustee on the Board of Trustees at the college, it became clear to me that so many years had passed since the college started that the wonderful story of how that college began in step with the community was going to be lost if we didn't get it written down, if we didn't get it documented. And many of the people who were there and who knew the story were passing away. So I approached Steve Schenck, who was the former Vice President for College Relations, and asked him what he thought of the idea of writing the history. And he thought it was a wonderful idea and said it was something that he felt should have been done a long time ago. So he and I got together and made a presentation to the board. The board chair at that time was Bill Nixon, and Bill also thought it was a great idea. And he designated the history committee, and he made Rollie Williams, who was then a trustee, not board chair yet, and me co-chairs of the committee. And then so we put together a committee of some retirees and some current people, Betty McLean and Mary Sorensen, who are both retirees from North Idaho College, and we set about getting the history written down.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Erna Reinhardt.
Welcome to the show, both of you, Fran and Sheila. It's great to have you here, and it's great to have the book as our conversation piece today. Sheila, tell us a little bit about how North Idaho College got started way back in 1933.
Well, it's a wonderful story. It's a story of some coincidences, and Fran will tell you more about it. But in 1933, it was determined at the high school that none of the high school graduates were going on to college. And when asked why, they said they had no money. It was 1933, the heart of the Great Depression. They didn't have enough money to leave home or to pay tuition at college. And it just happened that there was a man named Moritz Breakmeyer who was a traveling textbook salesman. And he got in on this conversation and he said, well, what you need is a junior college. And they had never heard of a junior college. So he explained to them how this concept had gotten started in the East and in the Midwest. I think the first community college was Joliet in 1901, I think. So it was a long-standing tradition, but new to the West. And they they thought it was a wonderful idea, and Fran will tell you more about how the community was then brought into this. But I think the exciting thing is that in 3 months, this concept became clear to everyone in like June, and the college opened in September. And I always think of that as, that's Idaho spirit. I mean, they didn't go asking permission, can we have a college? They said, let's have a college, and they got everyone together and got it going, had the doors opened, had a site, and they had professors and everything.
It's my understanding they also raised private funds. There was a group of women in particular that were very involved. Didn't they almost go house to house to get funds to start?
And Fran is going to tell you about that, because that was, of course, at first the college depended upon just tuition for its finances.
Fran, they started off with very little money, right?
Well, they started off with no money, actually. They had no money until they got tuition. And there's quite a story as to how it got started, but basically the PTA walked around the community and asked people if they were interested in sending their children to a college in Coeur d'Alene, and they said, well, yeah, that's a great idea. And so they found 60 people to do it. They found a place to have the college located. They went to the University of Idaho and talked with the president and the faculty there and got some suggestions and a promise. Well, I wouldn't say a promise, but some assurance that there would be accreditation, and off they went. That was it.
And 75 years later, there's something like 4,300 full-time students, and there's about 12 distance sites, and in addition to that, there's workforce training. There's both professional, technical, and academic programs, and I think about 8,000 people go through the workforce training now. So if those people could return, they'd be very pleased. We want to do some visuals for our viewers, both this week and next week. And Fran, Barr, you and Sheila have chosen some from the book. We won't only be able to show them. So we're going to take through on the first show 25, and then we'll have more on the next show. And I think we're doing these pretty much chronologically. So if you'd start, the staff will put up them on the screen and take us through these.
Okay, the first slide you're looking here at here is a slide of the location of the college, except at that time there was a fort on the location. If you look to the top right, you're looking at Tubbs Hill. Then to the left would be the city of Coeur d'Alene now, and then in the mid-ground, that is all what was at one point Fort Sherman. Earlier was the gathering place for the Coeur d'Alene tribe. And if you look closely, in the foreground you can see teepees, and that's where the Coeur d'Alene's...
That's way back when.
Yeah,
Let's move on now to the next slide.
Okay, in this next slide, you see some of the dignitaries from the Coeur d'Alene tribe, and in the center is Andrew Celtice. Next slide. All right, there were some Indian wars in the 1850s and 60s, and by 1870, the Senate or Congress decided that we needed a fort located in this area, and so it was located at the site where North Idaho College is now sitting, and that was in 1868.
It was Fort Sherman.
Fort Sherman.
Yes.
Well, what happened is the community or the city of Coeur d'Alene grew up around the fort, and before long there was a bustling city. As you can see, we have here the Coeur d'Alene Chamber of Commerce, and this would have been in 1920, and they all look quite successful. Okay, next slide. Sheila mentioned earlier the textbook salesman, Moritz Breakmeyer, who had the idea to start the college in Coeur d'Alene. You can see him there, and also you see the Coeur d'Alene City Hall. The third floor was what the city fathers decided to give to the college to start. The second floor was the city library that the college students could use.
And there was not very many students, right, the first year?
The first year, there were 75 students, I believe,
Okay.
and, well, I'll tell you more.
And there's the next slide.
Okay, next slide. What you see on the left side of your screen is the Coeur d'Alene Press announcing the new junior college, and you might be able to see the September 18th, 1933. It's a wonderful tabloid. On the right-hand side, you see the 1935 graduating class. So that would be the first group of students who had attended 2 years.
And the next slide.
In 1935, Moritz Breakmeyer announced his resignation. Apparently, he had literally bankrupted himself trying to keep the college afloat because of the tuition was the only source of income. He had to take a job with the Civilian Conservation Corps. And so there was a year period where there was an interim president, and what happened was enrollment dropped, and so this group of women, they called themselves the Sponsors Club. They went around town supporting the college, trying to collect monies, and they did an awful lot to keep the spirits of the people running the college up and to keep it going. Remarkable group of women.
In fact, the yearbook was, the second year yearbook was dedicated to the Sponsors Club for keeping their morale up.
And the next slide.
Okay, in this next slide, we included it because we wanted to show how the city fathers were already realizing that the city park and then the current site of the college was very important to the Coeur d'Alene tribe. And the park was dedicated to Fort Sherman, but more importantly to the Coeur d'Alene tribe. And you can see Joseph Celtice, second from the right, is there to accept the dedication. All right, Oren Lee was the president following the interim president, and he is the president who was responsible for getting a tax district or a taxing district for the college. What he did during his 9 years as college president was to spend a lot of time on the road and in Boise working with the Boise State or the Boise Community College group, trying to get a Senate bill to get taxing districts, which did happen in 1939.
The next slide.
I included this particular slide because we haven't shown the students much yet, and here they're just having fun. It's a winter skating party in 1939. And little did they know that 2 years later, they would be in a war.
The next slide.
All right. In December 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and the United States went to war. An interesting historical note is that 20 miles north of Coeur d'Alene, the Farragut Naval Training Station was opened, and many students left the college to go to work at the training station.
And the next slide.
When that happened, enrollment at the college just plummeted. I think in 1943 there may have been 35 students. So what the college did was to begin offering war training programs. There were first aid programs and also aviation classes.
Okay, we'll go on.
In 1944, Oren Lee resigned to go to work for the Navy, and George Kildow, who had been a superintendent of schools for the post-fall school district, and also a Board of Trustees member stepped in to fill Oren Lee's shoes.
He became president of the National Community College Association.
Yes, he did.
Our next photograph.
Well, before the war had started, the Board of Trustees floated an idea to the community to build a new college classroom and a vocational, not classroom, building, and also a vocational building for the college. And they needed a new site. They had talked about putting it at the location of McEwen Field, but McEwen Park, but the city folks decided they would prefer Winton Park, which was the former site of the fort and also the former site of the Coeur d'Alene Indians campgrounds.
Okay, and we'll move on.
Well, once the war was over, all the GIs came back and they had the GI Bill. And one group decided they were very interested in watchmaking. They went to the Board of Trustees and asked for a watchmaking class. So the college, at that time, we are now North Idaho Junior College, had the only watchmaking and instrument repair school in the United States.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah.
And we'll go on.
This was just a little cartoon that I found in one of the newspapers about the watchmaking school. And it just basically says, you put the watchy into the doodad and so on, and you get a watch.
Okay, we'll move right along.
Once everybody was back from the war, the Board of Trustees floated a bond, and finally we got our new North Idaho Junior College classroom building, now known as Lee Hall. And you can see all of the vintage cars parked in front of the building there. Next slide, please. What you see here is the moving of the college from City Hall in downtown Coeur d'Alene to the new site, the new classroom building, and that took place in December 1949. I'm right, yeah, that's December 1949, and everybody in town pretty much helped out. So you can see students, you'll see townspeople, you'll see the college president.
And that was the site that we have now, and it's on the beautiful shore of Lake Coeur d'Alene, and it's expanded since then.
That's right. The GIs were interested in a lot of classes, and one they were particularly looking forward to was the automotive class, which I think came about in the mid-50s.
Okay, we'll move on.
New slide. Here you see a home economics class, and what happened was all the women who had been out on the job working during the war came back to school, and the home ec class was very popular.
Okay, the next one.
Next slide. This is a view of the college from the air. And what you see at the top of your screen is the new Lee Hall. Across the road from that is the Mechanical Arts Building for the vocational students. And you can even see to the left there are barracks that were originally 3C or the Civilian Conservation Corps barracks. That's where pilots were housed when they were in training during the war.
And the next one.
I included this slide because the home economics class took a field trip to the cider cannery, and I believe that was in Post Falls. And Ed Cider is on the left, and he was also a Board of Trustees member, and we also have a building named Cider Hall now.
He was chair of the board when I arrived here. That was some time ago.
Gosh.
Yes. Next slide.
Once the new building was built, what nobody had really realized is that the campus was too far away from downtown for students to walk home to eat. So what the school ended up doing was, under the bleachers in the gym, they ended up setting up tables, and pretty soon there were ping pong tables, and before you know it, there was a student union there, even though there wasn't. So by the end of 1960, the school decided they needed to build a student union building, and they named it Edminster Student Union after Mrs. Edminster, who was one of the original Sponsors Club members.
And on the board.
And on the board for many years.
And I met her when I first arrived here. She's an interesting lady. The next slide.
All right. I wanted to show you an example of the early 50s. This is a Valentine's Day dance, and you can see that all the young women have long dresses. They're wearing heels. The men are in their suits and ties, and it's all quite formal. And then if you look at the next slide.
That's our last one for today.
Oops.
Something happened there. But anyway, the last one would have been the 1960s dance, and I guess it got misplaced somehow, but we got up to the 1960s on this program, and I'll turn now to Janelle Burke.
Sheila, my first question is for you. How do people get a copy of this wonderful book? How can they obtain one for their own use?
Well, the book, of course, has been published in this August, and they can get it at the North Idaho College bookstore, which is called the Micah Peak Exchange, and the book sells for $39.99.
And it's a large book. It's going to be good for coffee tables. It's going to be good for conversation, and it's just a very nice book.
But we're going to interrupt to let Erna also tell another place you can get the book if you can't come to the bookstore.
The book is also available online, and the website for North Idaho College is www.nic.edu, and there will be a link on that second page about NIC that will go to the bookstore, and you can buy that online there.
Now, the second part of my question, Sheila, is there was a rather interesting governing process for the college. In other words, it's not part of the state system. It's not a part of a state system as such. I'm not totally, and the original, as I understand, was somewhat independent. Can you explain for our viewers how that sort of worked together with the state programs?
Well, it began as Coeur d'Alene Junior College, and it was financed only by tuition. But when the taxing district was created, then we
became a part of the taxing
district, and so we had what we call our three-legged stool, where we get some money from property tax, some money from the state, and some from tuition.
There's a little misunderstanding here in the sense that, in relation to your question, we are under state law, and there are community colleges. There's now 3. There's a new one just was created in the Canyon, Boise areas, and everything's regulated by state law, including the Board of Trustees, which is elected locally, but all their duties and responsibilities are there. And as you said, there's state funding as well as tuition and local property tax. So we are an entity of state government in that sense.
Thank you, Tony, for explaining that.
Erna Reinhardt.
Sheila, share with us some of the work that the committee and that the two of you did in terms of how you researched all of the material that went into this book, the kinds of artifacts that you found, where you found those kinds of things, and the different resources that you used to gather your information for the book.
Well, Fran can chime in on this.
Okay.
Because she did the research, and it was primarily digging through old sentinels. Fortunately, we have some pretty good archives, and the Molstead Library has Coeur d'Alene Press on microfilm or microfiche. So it was primarily but we also got stories from people. And there's a book called Patchwork of Praise that was done a few years back. And that had a story by Art Manley, who talked about moving day, and also about his help in getting that taxing district established. So it was a variety of sources. What else, Fran?
Well, one thing I do want to mention is that Robert Singletary was the original writer, and he did a lot of the early research. He teaches at North Idaho College. He was a music instructor for some time, and I believe now he teaches some history classes. But he did what Sheila said. He spent a lot of time in our archives digging through old yearbooks, old newspapers. We even found the original document that set up the college in this old folder, and I took it to the librarian and said, "Oh boy, look at what this is. It's the original document of incorporation." So it was quite an interesting experience going through all those old materials.
A footnote is the late Art Manley was in the first class.
Yes.
And Mr. Johnson, who's still alive, was in that class too, and I interviewed him on the 50th anniversary. And then Art Manley became a state senator and was one of the great friends of this institution, getting a lot of state funding, and there were others too, but Art had a real affection. His degrees were in political science, although he went into the real estate business, so there's a wealth of stories that Art Manley always had to tell. We're just about out of time. We have time for maybe one more question, that is, what was the tuition in those first years? Wasn't it just compared with now?
Well, $30, was it?
I believe it was between $25 and $30. It kind of depended on the year. And it was interesting in those early years. Sometimes the instructors would get paid, sometimes they would not. And it just depended on how the finances went.
Well, thank you so very much. Ladies and gentlemen, the good news is that both our guests, Sheila Wood and Fran Barb, will be with us again next week, and we'll take you through the rest of this journey through memory lane. We're leaving off with the slides in a way in the 1960s, and we're going to take you through that period from then until now, and maybe we'll have some time to talk about where North Idaho College is today and the many remarkable things that have happened here, and a lot of it is certainly contributed to those founders a long time ago. And we're really enjoying bringing this in. Again, I want to remind you, this is a kickoff for the 75th birthday of the Constitution, which will last for the next 9 months. Until next week, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running in-house college production on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station.